So, Eric, you've heard of this hero's journey thing, right?
From a good friend of mine. I can't remember his name, but yeah, I have heard that. Yep.
So, there's the call to adventure, which gets things started.
Yeah.
And there's many steps along the way. And I think that we have a lot more to hear from Shawn.
Yes.
Because I think part of what his story exemplifies is that maybe you're walking many paths simultaneously.
Yeah. I'm very interested to hear, since we learned so much about the music career, young Shawn and all of the cool things he was doing as a rapper and in that very interesting
And
part.
he could pop a mean wheelie.
Well, not as good as his cousin, but he's still trying.
Don't say that, though. Don't say that, though.
That's right. He's still here. Anyway, no, I'm really interested to hear about sort of the next chapter and even what he's doing today. So I don't know. What do you say?
And that also aligns with us all getting to know each other.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, as we like to say, let's get to it.
Welcome to the Heart of the Cards, a conversation about creativity, inspiration, and dealing with what we're dealt.
Hey, this is Dan Green.
And Eric Stewart.
And this is part 2 of episode 23 with Shawn Conrad.
Oh, yeah. He's back.
Hey,
Hello, Shawn.
what's happening?
I'm really looking forward to picking up where we left off, or rather, I guess, just after we left off. So, and I love what you were saying about, making sure that even if you have some sort of observable, known level of achievement, and people might regard you with a certain status, you wanted to make sure that never was something that you projected, that was never a part of how you wanted to be recognized. And how you wanted to make sure that people understood, you're still you, and they're still them, right? As you said, you don't care what they drive, right?
Yeah.
So with that kind of grounded sensibility, which I'm sure is a part of your background, but also you were seeing that modeled by people you admire.
Yeah.
So, which is which is really, I think, affirming. But okay, so now that we've come up to this point, you said this is about the time that you get to meet Eric Stewart and survive.
And I ruined his life. Yes.
Never. So, I was, the 20-year-old version of myself. I met a girl, and next thing you know, I'm getting ready to have my first child. And
whoa, how old? You're in your 20s? Oh my God.
I'm 27, or 26.
Nice.
I had my first daughter when I was 27. So I'm about 26, and I know this is gonna happen. And guess what? Surprise, surprise. I am super excited about being a great father. Just as excited as I was about learning to do a 720 on my orange skateboard. Because for me, it's all the same, and I don't mean to diminish any one of the things or compare my daughter to a skateboard, but I want to be the best I can possibly be in this space, whatever the space may be, music, recording, being an engineer, or a father. So
where does that drop of the many things that are the collage of who you are? Where does that come from? Where does that piece come from? Is that, for instance, something that your mom provided to you as an example, or someone else in your family, or is that just sort of you?
I'll say this, and I think this is for somebody out there. I didn't grow up with my dad in the house. I can count.
Neither did Eric or I, really.
Yeah.
Okay. So you can relate. I can count on one hand how many times I saw my dad. And so I didn't learn anything about being a father from my dad. For some reason, when I knew that my first daughter was going to be a part of this world, I wanted to be great And I think that came from, being inspired from things that I've seen in movies or television shows or people
Right,
that I
right.
looked up to. Inspiration makes me want to do things and makes me want to do them well.
Right,
Almost.
Well, also somebody might observe that while your father didn't intentionally provide you with an inspiration in terms of a positive role model, sometimes we learn from what we've missed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you knew what not to do.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
this interview is not about me, but I'm just going to throw this one piece in there since we can sort of relate to this. Not that I never walked a mile in your shoes, so I don't know your story, but my father, basically left my mother when I was 4. He was around, but not really around. But when my first daughter was born, I had no reference of how to be a good father. I knew what a good parent was. My mother was a great parent. So I actually wrote a song called Empty Frame of Reference, which was, I don't know how to be a good father because I don't have a frame of reference.
Right.
And so you took the same sort of, here's the negative or here's the vacancy. I'm just have to wing it and figure it out on my own based on other pieces of things that are inspiring or are good examples that are not necessarily from my own bloodline.
Yeah. It honestly, I learned or I was inspired to be a good dad through television. As
Right.
basic as that may sound, I knew.
No,
that,
I know why you might feel self-conscious saying something like that, but I really understand what you mean.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that, Dan. It was a big deal to me. So that being said,
Wait. So now I got to ask, who were your TV dads that helped you out?
Good question, but there was no specific TV dad. My inspiration is based on, you want to love your child, you want to one day own a house, and you do anything for your child. I don't have a person in mind.
Right. You don't have that TV show with right.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. Fresh Prince of Bel-Air or anything like that. It wasn't anything remotely like that. It was based on some of the other principles about how to get good on roller skates or how to be a good rapper. This is what good looks like. So that's it. I knew that I wanted to take my daughter places, travel with her.
Right.
I already knew that before she was here. So that made me make a big decision. And so I am, fast forward, I am managed by Damon Dash, and I am hanging out with Damon Dash and a guy named Jay-Z every day. I was invited to be on
that guy.
I was invited to be on a record, to do a collab record, and Damon Dash heard it. On the phone, he signed me to Rockefeller. However, at that time, Damon Dash could not get Jay-Z a deal or myself. He couldn't find me a new deal. And then here comes my daughter in a few months. And I said to myself, I have to get a real job. Many people might think, why didn't you just hang out with Jay-Z? He's a billionaire now. Jay-Z, I don't even think was driving to Damon's house. I think he was taking the train, and he had another source of income that, I'll leave that as his business. I didn't have an additional source of income. And so there was no money coming in for even train fare. And I said to myself, I have to get a real job. I looked in the Village Voice at that time, and there was this engineering course. It was perfect for me because it was only a few months and you can be an engineer. And that was being taught out of a studio called Soundtrack, which ended up being a very big studio in New York that has mixed Denzel Washington films, Ron Howard films, and X, Y, and Z. But I end up at Soundtrack, and now I'm being inspired by a guy named Brian Weber, who's doing sound for commercials for Burger King and all these names that I saw on TV. And I'm saying to myself, why is this the first time I'm hearing about this? I can work.
This is a life? This is a job
This
I
is
can
a
do?
job? Are you sure? Right? And I was like, wow, you don't just have to rap. I can be on TV via credits or what have you. I can tell people about these shows that are coming out months before they come out. I don't have to rap. I don't have to rap and not make any money while being famous. So here I am.
Right.
I'm at Soundtrack Studios, and I became Brian Weber's assistant. And next thing you know, I'm in the room. And then one day Brian says, I'm getting ready to leave. And I was like, what? Brian left Soundtrack, and that studio that he worked in for years was now mine. And I am now a few years away from meeting you both at 4 Kids.
Mm-hmm.
So you are in charge of the studio, but he still owns it?
No, Soundtrack is this huge studio that has many rooms, and it started as Soundtrack in Boston.
I've recorded it. I'm thinking of the Soundtrack that's in Midtown. Is that the one you're thinking of?
20-something Street in Broadway. Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
So he took over Brian's room.
I think that's where I recorded Entei for Pokemon 3.
Got you. Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
So Brian had a room, Studio D, that was his room from 9 to 5.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yes.
It's only his.
Gotcha.
There's no one else in
I'm
there.
seeing this now.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Gotcha.
So I had a chance to become his assistant because the second week of audio engineering school, one of the owners of Soundtrack hired me. That happened.
Okay.
That happened because I stayed after class. This is very important. This is an important alert. Everyone who's listening,
let's give it some. We'll add some sound effects.
You gotta add sound effects here. So we did this class, digital class. This is how zeros and ones work. Blah blah blah. After class, 20-something students ran out of there so they could either go hang out, smoke a cigarette, or whatever. Shawn Conrad stayed and said, "Is that thing up there? Is that an animated show you guys are working on?" The instructor said, "Yes." "Is that something you're interested in?" I said, "Yeah." "Well, this pays more than doing music sessions, and you can work from 9 to 5 and make more than doing music sessions." I said, "What?"
Dude. And as an expecting father, I mean, this is music to your ears.
This is unbelievable. As an expecting father and a semi-famous rapper that was not making any money.
Which is the course, I mean, obviously Jay-Z's a part of your story. That's just part of the course, even for people who make it big.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. As you said last episode, the Beatles playing in places without windows. That's just part of the course.
Yeah.
I also
think now I have urgency.
I was gonna say I think it's also interesting though that the shift you made, both being a more responsible to-be father, which is very respectful. The shift you made from being in front of people, a live audience, the notoriety, the spotlight, even though you said that was not a motivating factor, you tasted that, you experienced that. It is in itself a drug, which is kind of hard to walk away from, even if you feel like this is the time to maybe do something different or hang up that microphone, right? But I find it interesting that your confident personality, which likes to do everything that they can do to the best of their ability, makes a shift from being on one side of the glass to the other, you're talking about the financial part of that, okay? You're talking about the responsible part, the steadier income. Oh, this is great. And yes, this is a great way to use your talents. Trust me, I've experienced it firsthand.
Yeah.
But my question is, while you were making that transition, did you not miss the other stuff?
Well, that's a great question. So let me paint a quick picture for you. Before I even made the decision to go to audio engineering school, I was at Grand Central Station one day, and I saw a rapper that had records on the radio. I met him once or twice, but he was standing several feet away in Grand Central Station wearing a long white T-shirt, which was popular at the time. You know, rappers wore long white T-shirts and whatever, you know. And he was just standing in Grand Central Station. And I looked at him at that moment and said, that's not what I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And listen, forgive me. I didn't know anything about what was really going on in his life, but I didn't want to be on any corner or telling people, you know, I'm a good rapper, but then going to the store to buy my fourth bottle of beer.
Right.
And so that was a big deciding factor. Then I had motivation. I'm not just becoming an audio engineer. Remember, Brian Weber, who I ended up assisting, is doing commercials for Burger King and X, Y, and Z or X, Y, and Z. I learned that post-production audio engineers, especially the ones who were doing commercials for the Super Bowl, were making $300,000 a year. Several engineers, not just one. So I'm now feeling like number one, I'm not feeling like, there's this struggle between wanting to be on stage and doing post-production. I am fully on board with how to become one of the engineers that mixes a Super Bowl commercial and makes more than any doctor or lawyer that I know.
Right. But you're also doing something you enjoy. Like the potential to make the money is a fantastic thing, right?
Yep.
But you mixing is still a creative outlet. It's still from your mind, your ears. It's still your interpretation of the way things should sound.
For sure.
I think that anything that you would ever get involved in would involve creativity.
Right. You're exactly right. But I am being 100% honest that the financial piece was something for several years that I could not get to, even though the Notorious B.I.G. is singing my lyrics, and I just did a song with Jay-Z and Original Flavor. I can't seem to get any financial reward to live an even better life and a better life plus one, plus plus my daughter. So the financial piece was in fact a big deal. And I also felt that I discovered something that my mom never heard of. Like these guys, you know, Brian was wearing jeans and t-shirts most days and taking his six figures home. And I couldn't believe that I was blessed enough that God was like, hey, I got something for you. You're not going to believe this, but I got you. You're going to be in a position where you're doing better than some of your favorite rappers.
And I think this is really important to give some light to or give some space to, because especially in the kind of conversations that Eric and I have on this show, we talk a lot about the motivating stuff, the timeless stuff, the enduring stuff, and we don't talk a lot about how different the role of money is at different stages of your life. And you're at the stage of your life in the story, so far, where it could become a crisis if you don't make enough money. Like it could be bad. So you're facing, there's also this part, we talk about the hero's journey as a way to get conversation started because it has these elemental universal parts that apply to anybody's experience. And there's this part of the hero's journey called the trials. and that's when you're confronted with things that could defeat you.
Yeah.
Right? So you have to defeat them, and as the expecting father with no visible means, right? Until this situation came along. I mean, that's an amount of fear alone.
Yep.
Which is why I asked you about this positive approach to things, because a lot of people would confront these challenges and shrink away. And I know I would probably just be, I'd go in a closet and hold a stuffed animal of some sort. But you look at it and say, let's do this. Let's get on it. To borrow a phrase you just said also, which I want to take from you, this is what good looks like. You want that.
Yeah.
That's where you're coming from.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we shouldn't I don't want us to project to our audience that we're like, oh, money is meaningless and we are above money. And no, we're not. We get it.
It's so you go from working at Soundtracks, which we know and love, and you're working on all the commercials, and you're working on the film stuff, and you get this invitation of, hey, have you ever thought about working in cartoons or animation? And of course you turn your nose up at that kind of work, which I completely understand. But I'm curious at what brought you into the next chapter of where Dan and I got the privilege of meeting you and working with you at 4Kids.
Even though I was reluctant to go to the interview to work at 4Kids, I went and there was an opportunity at the time, and I took it. And now, once I take that opportunity, I hook in the way I hook in with anything else. I want to know everything about doing post-production sound for cartoon shows. On Saturdays, I'm recording other shows. I'm listening to it. I listen to 10 seconds of it. Then I play 10 seconds of what I'm working on for 4Kids. And I'm all in. And, when we met, when I met you, Eric, I felt like I had a lot to bring to the table, as well as a lot to learn. But I wasn't in fear of that because I know I'm gonna hook in. This is no different than learning how to rap for me. No different than learning about audio engineering and turning the knobs instead of being on stage. I'm gonna hook in 100%, and that was my mission. And again, with good financial grounding, as something I don't have to worry about, I have full reign to perfect my craft. And I'm talking about all the way from contacting engineers. I used to try to reach out to engineers that worked in Hollywood. I used to try to find sound effects guys who were doing anything remotely close to what I was getting ready to work on at 4Kids, to understand, digest, and spit out the highest level of work that I possibly could for working on stuff at 4Kids with you and Dan.
Now, were you familiar with the sort of the anime, the Japanese style, the dubbing, the ADR? Was that even something that was like, okay, I've seen cartoons like this, or I've done sessions that were, as you were just mentioning, the many different kinds of things you were doing, but this is definitely a niche, right?
Yeah. So I would say that just joining 4Kids, I heard of Pokemon,
right.
But
You're welcome.
I didn't know, Yu-Gi-Oh! And the other shows. I remember clearly, and I say this to people all the time, but I have vivid memories of people not being able to pronounce Yu-Gi-Oh! Properly, including people that worked at 4Kids.
I'm not insulted that you're calling me out like that. I'm gonna get it down, I promise.
It and I say that to say, or even set up. It's funny how we started working on the show. I started working with Eric, meeting you, Dan, and just going through, how do I encapsulate this? The growth of these characters, and making sure that when we three worked together, that it was a well-oiled machine, almost factory-like, but not factory-like in with stiffness, but factory-like with flow. It
Right,
was
with
amazing.
precision.
It was amazing that one day I would be in the grocery store getting some groceries, turn to my left, and the TV guide next to all these magazines said Yu-Gi-Oh, the number one show in America or something like that. I almost had, I had to touch my face and make sure I was awake, because this is the show
I
that
thought.
we
Wait,
were
now
working
I
on.
thought it's that, which is amazing. Now I don't mean to be confrontational.
Yeah.
but I thought that TV Guide article was Yu-Gi-Oh! The best male lead voice ever. Maybe I'm imagining. I don't know. Okay, so
I
whatever.
have the
But
award
it was
downstairs.
one of those two things.
I have that award downstairs if you want to see it. No, but well, what's interesting, Shawn, that you bring up that sort of immediate gratification of seeing that stuff. I almost had the opposite experience because of the production schedule and and being sort of in the studio all the time. Not just directing, but also being in the shows. I just felt like we were on like a treadmill so much that it was hard to really sit back and enjoy the fruits of our labors, like during it.
It was getting it done, and you guys know that better than I do. But even being a part of the sessions, and just for the people listening, So of course, when you come in as the VO, you've got a lot of work to do, and you better do it well. That's not to diminish that part, but when you're part of the production team, it's you're juggling multiple shows at once. You know what the deadlines are, you know what the expectations are, and you got to hit those numbers. You got to hit those dates, and that's a much different burden of stress,
right,
I think, to live with.
And
So when part of, if I may just continue, that part of what I was trying to do showing up for you guys was making sure you didn't have to waste much of your time on me, because I understood the burden you were carrying.
And you did a lot of great work quickly for us, which made life a lot easier. And I've said this as a director too, and Shawn probably has been in a room when I've actually confronted actors who decide to drag their feet to see if that's a way to make more money per hour with me. See how long they last on my shows when they do that, because of the pressure. And the flip side of that is, if you work really well for me quickly, I'm going to give you more work. Right, that's just going to happen. And Shawn and I,
I read that.
And Shawn and I working side by side on a lot of things. Whenever there was, and I'm just going to say this, whenever there was like a high pressure, got to get this done. You guys got to do with the ADR and the mixing and all of that stuff. Now remember, Shawn is coming from mixing. Right, he's mixing the commercial stuff like that. He's brought in here where now he's got to do every part of the recording process of the show. So recording each individual actor, assembling the dialogue with me, and then we do a mix down so that the producers can hear what we've done, and we do fixes, and then we're laying in the sound effects, and then so there's all these pieces, and I could remember many, many times where it was like, this needs to be done yesterday. So we're putting Eric and Shawn in the booth together, and they're going to work, right? Because the things would get done, quickly and good. And I knew that I could rely on Shawn all the time. And I was joking around, but I was also being serious about the fact that there were times where he would turn to me and go, I got to use my other hand because you're giving me carpal tunnel because I'm punching in these numbers so fast because you're calling out these time codes so much. And it's like, I'm sorry, man. I know your potential. I know your ability. You're like Superman over there. So you just got to remind me that for a moment, you just want to be Clark Kent for just a second.
So I think I'm excited about giving you this side of the glass right here. So let me tell you that hearing you and Dan talk about those hundreds of days we three worked together, for me, I feel like we were working in a similar way to how the Golden State Warriors play basketball at the moment, and maybe the Jordan Bulls finally got it together. I am almost regretful that the way we were working is not captured on video. Because for me, there was this balance and goal of perfection for Eric to be directing Dan, and then for Dan receives this direction, and all while that's going on in a very short period of time, I've already backed up to the spot we're supposed to record in, made a note on my script about what we like about the take, and I've given Dan enough pre-roll so he can get into the line that he's going to say next. This was done in seconds, and there is no easy way to do that. And I wish it was captured, at least for me. But even for people now, to see that happen would be at the least interesting. And I would summarize that by saying, for me being the engineer, I wanted to make sure that you, Dan, had no worries or hiccups about where the recording started from so that you can do your job. And for Eric, I didn't want him telling me about engineering things when he is trying to direct.
Yes.
So
we rely on each other. It's very symbiotic. I knew that you were going to be recording properly and also paying attention to what we're doing. I also valued your opinion. It wasn't like you just were pushing buttons for me. And the same thing, like, Dan and I, our friendship developed from that trust of director and actor originally. And you have that going. You're right. I wish that stuff was documented somehow, because I don't think people would believe it if they saw it. I don't think that they would believe what went into it as quickly as it had to happen, and still with the quality that we were able to show at the end of the session. I remember one of the production coordinators asked me one day, how come when you're in there, it takes X amount of time to do this stuff, and when this other team is in there, it's twice as long? And I'm like, please don't ever compare me and Shawn to any other director and engineer in that room. Please don't do that.
I think, and I want to be careful to not be braggadocious, but I think something that's funny is, when you, Dan, and I left the recording studio, I feel it's like we were leaving out of surgery. You take the gloves off and do the hand wash, and you go tell the family everything's going to be okay. It was hundreds of lines. It was many times one session was for several episodes. And so we're not only burning through a script for an episode, we're going, go to episode such and such now, and let's work on that for a half hour, right? And again, I don't want you guys ever looking over thinking about engineering things pre-roll or where is the correct place we're recording from. And that is I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it, but that is no different than how one might carefully construct a song. One might learn how to pop the wheelie for 8 blocks, instead of 3, right? Like this is something, that was the fastest I've ever gotten on Pro Tools. I've never worked that fast. I where I don't have to look down at the keys. My hands are flying all over the place, and we come out of the room, take off the gloves, do the hand wash and talk to the family.
That is right. Well, that's it was definitely a special time. I am so grateful that I got to experience that for as many years as I was there, and with these friendships that I've developed over all of these years.
Oh yeah.
So from that, as you said, we walked out. We walked off into the sunset to do other things. Some of us, Dan's still, in that area, of the country and still working, regularly. Not so much maybe at that facility, but still there.
Yep.
I've talked about where I've, sailed off to. But what is Shawn Conrad doing after he leaves 4 kids?
Nice. I was married at the time. We're talking about 2004, and my wife and I said, let's move to some place that's warm, because we always vacation in places that's warm, and we ended up in Atlanta. I got here to Atlanta, continued to do post-production for Cartoon Network, TNT, and TBS.
How much you hated cartoons? You see how much?
One of the first few gigs that I did when I got to Atlanta, a producer comes in from Turner Broadcasting and says, "Yeah, we're gonna do some promos for this show." I said, "That's my show." The person said, "What?" I said, "I mixed all of these." What? Yeah, I mixed all of these shows, and I'm getting ready to mix promos for. Crazy. So I spent time there doing some post-production sound. The 08 recession came, and out of the 08 recession that probably ended more like 2010 or 2011, work slowed down in post-production sound. So what did I do? You guessed it. I taught myself how to write HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and started working in a new industry.
Wow.
I worked for...
I could never do that.
I worked for Coca-Cola, WebMD, the Home Depot corporate office, and I am coding and developing applications for these Fortune 500 companies because nothing is different. I want to learn how the good guys do this. And here I am. And many times after my coworkers get to know me, they either look me up and find out I used to rap or something like that. And they ask that question I told you guys about in part 1. They say, "What are you doing here? You're Freshco. You have records with people who they call the greatest rappers ever." And I look back and say, I had to make a decision. I wanted to be a great father to my now 3 daughters, and I'm okay with it all. I have a life that most people won't realize in their lifetime. I have been able to spend time with my daughters instead of being on a tour, drinking and smoking in some back room. And then that brings me to today. Because of all this work that I've done, especially at 4 kids, working with, you and Dan and Will Ferrell and Will Arnett. I've worked with so many people in the voice industry.
Yeah, those guys are okay too, but it's mostly
they're all right.
No, it's Dan.
I ended up getting a voiceover agent myself.
Nice.
And now I actually teach people how to do voiceover work. And I basically said to myself, I wasn't only a voiceover for a much shorter period of time than Eric or Dan, but I've worked with...
Well, we're really old. We're really old.
I've worked with... That's not true. I've worked with voiceover artists in so many different facets of voiceover. I can really give people the whole rundown on everything that's involved. If you want to be in commercials, if you want to be in anime, if you
Yeah,
want to
you've
do
seen a
industrials.
lot of it.
So I feel like I have good information to share, and that's one of the things that I do right now. Teach my voiceover course.
Well, you've painted a picture of being a sponge. You've painted a picture of how you
Yeah,
have
yeah.
absorbed things around you and then gone to do them yourself. I think that that's a great way to live one's life, is to always want to learn. So you working on one side of the glass and digesting all of what's going on around you, from listening to a director talk to an actor and hearing what that actor gives back and all of the nuances of that room. You
Yeah.
could either sit there and just go, well, that's not my job. I'm just going to make sure that the stuff goes down and is recorded well, and then I'm going to go home. Or you sit there and you digest all that and you absorb it all. And so, I mean, it doesn't surprise me that you would be in a coaching position now
Yeah. Yeah.
to something that you experienced.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, all those days that we three spent together shaped a lot of what I teach. So yeah, it's a way to give back. It's a way to introduce people who at 20 something years old, or at a young age, those things that I didn't know even existed, these careers that didn't exist as far as my family knew, now that I can share and I can show people that it's possible to do it, and be a good guy and be a good dad at the same time. I do a lot of things, and that with friends and such. And I try to, when it's appropriate, also let people know, I'm gonna go hang out with my daughters this weekend, or I'm taking them to New York, or I'm gonna surprise them with a trip here, because I think people just need to know that that is possible and real, that you can be a success in anything you want, and also be a loving parent and a sharing person. And whatever negatives they've seen on the TV, you don't have to be that. And I just feel compelled to show a different side.
Dan and I have talked about balance as well. I mean, I've told Dan many, many times that I, as an outsider looking in, but I'm impressed at his balance of being a father and also being a professional in this industry.
Yeah.
There's still, family is first. That's the priority, but he still also works in the industry that he loves. I mean, I don't want to be talking for you, Dan, but I do look at that as an inspirational representation of what a father could be.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you for that. I'll trade off of what Shawn was saying about his own trajectory into that, where you go with the best examples you can imagine and hope to live up to them,
Yeah.
even if they aren't personal ones.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and well, I'm repeating myself to an extent, but the positivity, the what can I do with this attitude that you've revealed about yourself in this discussion, I think is really helpful to a lot of people to witness, to absorb. And I know I've spoken many times in this series about how I've had periods where I struggle.
Yeah.
And I wish that I had more of that Shawn Conrad magic of looking at it as an opportunity to learn, as an opportunity to grow, and to include more into my life, and to listen less to the voices of fear and doubt. And so that's a wonderful thing that you've contributed. Thank you.
And thank you for saying that. I want to remind people who are listening now, and I always try to explain, and maybe I don't do a great job, but these things, or this attitude of me, looking at the world and saying I'm gonna do this thing, and I can do it, or whatever. It's the magic is, I am excited that I have an opportunity to do it. It's I don't know if I explain that well enough, but I am childlike excited to now learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and I just do it. I am not thinking about what age I am and does anybody do this at this age. That's not crossing my mind. What's crossing my mind is who are the best people who do this, and how did they get there? The same. It's nothing has changed from when I was 14 years old. It's the exact same. I am excited. So that's what makes me do it. It's not me trying to prove something. I am, I would say this right now, and I laugh as I'm getting ready to tell you guys this. I am currently teaching myself Spanish. And
what?
And I
mean, okay.
I laugh because I know how crazy that sounds. I laugh. I know that when I say that to somebody, they're gonna be like, "Dude, what's up with you?" But you'll laugh even harder if you saw me last night with one of 4 Spanish books that I ordered on Amazon, with my pen, scratching in how to do present tense, past tense, and all this stuff in Spanish. It's why Dan, I couldn't tell you why. Eric, I can't tell you why I have a book and I set aside time to do that, but I'm excited about it. I'm excited.
I'm sure you'll get a lot out of it.
I hope so, but I'm super excited. I went to a Mexican restaurant the other day and ordered my whole meal in Spanish.
Nice.
The friend I was sitting across from, her jaw dropped. I've known her. I've known her for 4 years. She never heard me say anything in Spanish in 4 years, and I ordered my meal in Spanish. And I mean,
that's awesome.
It's ridiculous. So yes, I think it's funny too. I think it's funny. There's no reason for me to just teach myself another language, but I can't explain it. I can't.
All they need to
explain
do
it.
is pay attention to your stories and your journey, and it's very clear. If we were to paint this with a broad brush, you like to learn. You like to learn and you are interested in knowledge and whatever it may be. You're talking about categories and different things that have, there's no one common denominator except for the fact that they're all things that Shawn wants to understand better.
Yep.
And I love it. I love it. But that's something I think that the listeners too that are confused by, I like all these things and I like to do all of this stuff. And, one day I'll get to some of it. But it's so overwhelming. But you are telling them that you can also do more than one thing. And sometimes you can do more than one thing at once, but you also have to focus to get it done. Like you can't just dabble in things, just try it. And you talking about computer programming coming from rapping and then engineering and and then now learning how to speak Spanish, which I think is important actually. But it's just really, it's refreshing to hear because I think we get stuck as people sometimes in just doing our one thing, it's just the same. I get up, I do this, and if that's your job and this is what you do every day, that's fantastic if you're happy. But sometimes you need to branch out a little bit because you might find something that you didn't even know interests you is something that's going to make you even happier or bring you even more joy.
Correct.
And that you're an example of that, which I hope that someone out there who is saying to themselves, I just don't know which one of these 10 things to do, listens to what your story is and says, maybe I can do 10 things.
Listen, I shared with a friend not too long ago. I said, I put some of my recent acting stuff up. I sent it to some agents, and I just got signed by a new acting agent. And
Congrats.
and thank you very much. And the friend on the phone said, okay, great. Is that what you want to do? And I said, you've asked me that before. And I try to answer it by telling you the thing that I want to now do. And I said, I'm not going to do that anymore. I said, my answer is I'm going to do all of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's my answer.
Good for you.
That's a great response. Hey, that is so well encapsulates what you've shared with us in this conversation.
Thank you.
And that's a great, I think, parting thought.
Yeah. I think
for now, and we will have more conversations, and I'll look forward to them.
I
but that's a wonderful summation.
Yes.
That's a wonderful summation.
Yeah.
So, Shawn,
Yeah.
anything else you want to share with us before we say goodbye to people for the moment?
Just remember, whoever you are, whatever it is you're doing, you're in your history. It doesn't start at a future date. If your current path is not exactly what you wanted it to be, you are still learning things that you don't want to do, which is very important. That's a good thing. You're learning about people
Well said.
that you should not be around or that you don't jive with. Those things are very important and part of how your history making will be great. So just keep going. If you're active, things will start to develop. Trust the process.
Great thoughts, Shawn.
Yes, really good.
Great thoughts. Thanks for sharing all that with us.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this, and I hope people listening got a little something out of this.
I'm sure they will. So let's bring this to a close, my friends. Again, thank you, Shawn, and as always, Eric. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan,
for being an essential part of this, but perhaps no more essential than our wonderful listeners and followers who show up for us and who are still discovering us and who share with us so many wonderful things when we get a chance to meet you in person. That is so gratifying to Eric and I, and we are still exploring what this show can be and where it can go, and we're so fortunate to have you with us every step of the way. And we'll look forward to the next time we can share a conversation with you about creativity, inspiration, and dealing with what we're dealt.
Thanks for listening to The Heart of the Cards with Dan Green and Eric Stewart. We hope this conversation in some way spoke to you. Whatever your journey, we look forward to crossing paths again in the next episode. This is Veronica Taylor, and on behalf of Andromeda Productions, we wish you well.
Andromeda, always a sound choice.